Welcome everyone to Hong Kong as two of India's top chess academies, Chess Gurukul and Chess Thulir, clash against each other. Pragg is playing on the top board of Chess Gurukul, while Shyam Sundar, who's actually the founder of Chess Thulir and one of India's finest trainers, takes on Pragg. It's actually a battle between a top class grandmaster and a top class trainer. Let's see how this game shapes up. Pragg has the white pieces, a handshake, and off we go. He opens with pawn to e4. Shyam is not known for his opening play, and you can see there he plays the Scandinavian on move 1. He wants to just play something that's interesting. Knight to c3 brings his queen to d6. Will be interesting to see what Pragg chooses here. Will he play the main line which goes usually d4? He plays his bishop to c4. And now Shyam plays a knight out to f6. And maybe knight to f3. Finishing your development. Brings his knight out. Castles d3 or d4. It's a normal way to play. Scandinavian is structurally a sound opening. You can see black structure is fine, but your queen is out too early, and this is something that's always an issue. Now h3 played by Pragg. Bishop h5 keeps the pin. If you take here, I'll take back with the queen, and it seems like white has a very nice edge with the bishop pair. Shyam is taking his time in the opening. He wants to be sure. There can be certain tactics like bishop takes f7 which need to be carefully assessed in positions. Bishop f3, queen f3, maybe knight c6. Not a bad idea to come to d4 with the knight hitting the queen and the c2 pawn. And Shyam takes a very long think here. He takes, queen takes, and now knight to c6 is perhaps the idea. Yes. And Pragg quickly plays bishop b5. He's so ready with his move, and he is basically saying to Shyam that he's going to take this knight. Take black long castles, takes, and queen takes. Now look at the structure. It's broken, and in return usually black has the bishop pair, but not here. Pragg starting to move quickly. It's the same material balance. Both sides have a knight and a bishop. And Shyam is also a minute and 10 seconds down on the clock. He brings his bishop out to e7. And for Pragg, it's a question of how he wants to continue. You can put your bishop out on e3. You can also push your pawn to g4. You can play your bishop to g5 as well. He goes rook to d1. Not so sure what Pragg is aiming for with that move. King b7. Maybe he wants to put his king back on f1. That could be an idea. I think essentially the advantage that he takes. Wow. He takes and plays knight e4. Very important that bishop takes b2 was not working because of rook b1. So bishop e7. Knight comes to d2. Very quickly played by Pragg. And this entire trade with bishop g5 and takes was very interesting because now the knight gets a super solid square on c4. It cannot be moved from there. And the bishop is not such a great piece. So a very interesting positional decision by Pragg. Rook e1. Shyam gains space. He puts all of his pawns on dark squares, but he now has a nice clamp in the center. And the question is, how is Pragg going to continue? He goes king f3, h5, and maybe he wants to enter in this way. Okay, it will take time, but that's maybe a plan. Rook e4. Playing on the light squares is Pragg. And Shyam, well, he can trade a pair of rooks. He goes rook d4. Pragg brings his other rook to e1. 1 minute 56 seconds. Pragg has made 22 moves in a minute on the clock. That's amazing. Shyam is down to his last 50 seconds. King comes up to c6. And if black gives a stiff resistance here, it's not so simple to win such positions as white. Because, yes, white is better, but how are you going to break in is the question. Rook takes e4. That will be interesting to see how Pragg manages to do that. He has to open a front, and one idea is to play g4, maybe try and play g5. The other idea is to play something on the queen side, but I don't know how to put the pawns. a3, b4 will simply get traded. Not so sure. He goes pawn to g4, and hg, you take with the rook, attacking the pawn on g7. Very interesting decision. You could have taken with the h pawn, but Pragg realizes that there's pressure here, and when Shyam goes g5, he's going to push h4 later. Whoa, rook a4, attacking this pawn, rook a8, defending it. The speed at which Pragg swung his rook over was super quick. And now the h3 pawn is a bit weak. Maybe you want to do away with it with h4. With the knight, sometimes you want to narrow down the position where the fight is taking place, because the knight can move on both colors. King e6, maybe with the idea of f5 at some point. Rook b8, b3 quickly played, and rook b4 offering a trade. But this time trading won't be right, and Pragg rightly keeps the knight on the board. He could have gone rook h8, by the way. Now the rook comes back, stopping it. Rook h7, keeping an eye on the c7 pawn. Rook to g8. Shyam has defended this incredibly well. And Pragg down to a minute 16 seconds. Shyam has 26 seconds only. Knight to e3. I think Pragg's just moving around, trying to tire out his opponent. Often Pragg has said that in difficult positions, it might be objectively possible to defend, but not with this time control. Okay, what's the next plan now? He comes back, rook h4. Shyam plays his bishop to d6, and rook h5 played, controlling the f5 square. Bishop comes back, he's waiting. And you can see Pragg there struggling a bit with what needs to be done. Rook h4. He swings the rook over and now brings his king up. Okay, so the rook is tied to the defense of the a6 pawn. f5 is not possible. The knight defends it. But now what? What next? Shyam is going to wait. Rook 8, rook a7, rook 8, rook a7. And Pragg has to find a way in. He goes knight to c4. And Shyam goes back, rook a8. The knight jumps to d2. Now you can see how Pragg is maneuvering his knight. King e3, making space for the knight to go to e4. He goes rook a5, and now knight e4. He gets the c5 pawn. So that is where Praggnanandhaa managing to outwit his opponent. Rook takes c5, a5 played here, and c5 pawn is lost. f4 played. The thing here to note is that f5 pawn is also falling. Pragg being very careful here, because AB, is there some check? No, there's not. He takes the second pawn, and you can see that white is now 2 pawns up. Rook a2, rook comes to c5, and this is a trivial win for a player like Pragg. And let's see how he converts it. He brings his king up. Then rook cuts off the black king, starts pushing the pawns. Pawns start moving ahead, and step by step, everything works like clockwork. Rook h4 in order to play c4 perhaps. Rook d1, king c5 enters in. Rook to g1, and he pushes the pawn. d5, and Shyam waits with rook f6, rook e7 to get this move, rook e6, and after rook h4 you have the move p6, getting the two connected passers here. Rook takes check and rook g6, and it's game over. Shyam designs, Praggnanandhaa showing excellent class there, and also the way he maneuvered the knight to win that pawn is worthy of introspection again. Let's have a look at it. So here Shyam was holding his own and Praggnanandhaa played his knight to c4. And this is where he came up with this plan that he can attack the c5 pawn by rerouting his knight here and the rook to a5. And so he first plays knight d2, then king e3. And at this point perhaps Shyam could have understood that this is Pragg's idea, but he had very little time. f5 could have been one way to continue, or king d7, so that if knight e4, then f5 and later the king could come to c6. But he went rook a8. It's still fine, rook a5, and now this is the moment where f5 needed to be played, but instead he went rook a7 and Pragg quickly jumped in with his knight. This time it's difficult to control both c5 and f6. I mean, you could go king d5, but f6 hangs, so the pawn was lost, and with it the game as well.
Freedom begins with a choice. In 2008, we made ours. Freedom knows no borders. Step by step, we became part of the global financial system. In 2019, we went public on NASDAQ. In 2024, we built a digital ecosystem. Fintech, lifestyle, telecom, everything comes together in one unified digital space. Today, freedom is a system that shapes markets. $2 billion in annual revenue, $9.3 billion market capitalization, 11 million customers, 11,300 plus employees, 230 offices worldwide. Freedom begins with a choice, and every day we make it again. Freedom Holding Corp. One ecosystem, many possibilities.